Hello, my name is David Barker. I'm a video producer in Rochester, New York, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce my friend, Dr. Shana Clark. And this program is Ask Dr. Shana. This is a YouTube show, and it was done for approximately a year, and we are now picking it back up with a kind of a question and answer format. So without any further ado, let me introduce to you Dr. Shana. Dr. Shana, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing fine. My left eye has gotten some sort of irritant, but I've got an appointment with my ophthalmologist. I just don't want anybody who's used to seeing me as I was thinking, what happened to my eye? It's nothing to worry about. Now, today, since this whole coronavirus pandemic started since I did my last episode before, I thought I would tell you that I have not only an MD and decades of work as a public sector psychiatrist. Why public sector? Because the people in the public sector are often poor, they have not had a wonderful education, and they are both very frightened and despairing when it comes to thinking about that a member of their, either themselves or a member of their family has become mentally ill. In other words, those are the people that really need a good doctor, because a lot of upper class, well-off people who have been well educated could probably think things through for themselves if they wanted to, but they prefer to go to a professional, but they don't really need the professional's help in the same way.
And right now it's such a trying time because of this virus. Do you have any words of advice about public health and how the people that you're looking to serve can help themselves?
I would tell you, first of all, that I do have an earned doctorate in public health. But I've decided for today just to go into some details which I haven't noticed that anyone has broadcast on the radio or on TV. And that is, we all know, we've been told many times about washing our hands frequently for at least 20 seconds. And by the way, if you want a measure of 20 seconds because you don't have a second hand, you can take it as singing happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday dear so-and-so, happy birthday to you through twice. That'll give you 20 seconds. And that's the time you're supposed to spend rubbing your hands, which have soap on them, together, and remember to wash in between your fingers, which you can do by closing your hands together and rubbing up and down with the fingers of the other hand, the way we used to when we played. We used to have this game called church, which was a hand game, and you made a steeple with your hands. Well, and then 20 seconds washing your hands, and also that if you do happen to go out to, say, a doctor's office, or you use the restroom in your grocery store or something like that. I'm thinking of a restroom, in other words, where other people that you don't know might have used it recently. I would suggest you don't want to touch the toilet flusher, or the taps when you wash your hands, or this is the one that people forget, the door when you exit the restroom. And you can avoid this with toilet paper in your hand as you touch the flusher, the taps, or the door, or a paper towel, or you can even use your own handkerchief if it has been laundered and has not been anywhere near your nose or mouth since it has been laundered. Or you can also use a faith cloth, but it also has to have been nowhere near your face since the last laundering. So pick a face cloth that's maybe a different color from the others, and that's your face cloth for going out in public. Now, you should also be careful to carry it in a bag because you don't want to put it in your pocket, the face cloth, while you're touching the door or whatever. Protects you from picking up coronavirus from the door. But then if you put the face cloth, which might have coronavirus on one side, in your pocket, then the next time you put your hand in your pocket, oh boy, you just ruin things. So think about it. Think about, how do I have something between my skin and whatever it is that I'm touching at all times so that I don't pick up the virus from the last person who touched that surface, who may not have done so with a paper or cloth interface, and may therefore have deposited the virus on a countertop, a door handle, whatever.
I've got a question. All of this seems to be, it's making me anxious just thinking about, oh my goodness, if I go outside and I have to, be always cognizant of where my hands are. Do I have a piece of paper toweling with me? Has someone touched this? Is this, should I just stay home?
Well, we've been told to stay home if we can, but we're also, it is recognized that there are some things, such as doctor's appointments for somebody who has an illness that has to be managed, or going to the grocery to get some food, or going to a pharmacy to get some meds that are essential. And I'm just saying, don't let's be very good when we stay home and then blow it when we go outside to get our prescription or something.
Okay.
Um, and the thing is, keep something between your skin and whatever somebody else who, let us say, is not as conscientious a hand washer as you are, um, who may have gotten some virus on the surface of something. Um, and it really, as long as you say you're not going to touch uh, unknown objects, meaning objects that you don't know who touched them last, uh, in the out in the world, that's all you have to think of. Except, as I say, you don't then put your protective machine laundered handkerchief in your pocket and then just put your hand in your pocket the next time to take it out, because you don't know whether you're touching the correct side that's supposed to be against your hand or the other side. So just carry it in a bag.
Can
Uh,
can you can you put in perspective, doctor, how likely is any one person gonna contract the virus and possibly die?
Well, you'd have to be able to tell me how many people have touched that tap in the last 3 days. And for sure, how many disinfections with a disinfectant capable of killing the coronavirus has it had in the last 3 days? You know, and usually that kind of information is not available. And since carrying, shall we say, a laundered handkerchief that you haven't used in an eon as a handkerchief is not terribly difficult. It's not terribly heavy. You just have it in a little sort of doggy bag, and you remember to take the doggy bag with you. That doesn't take an awful lot of preparation. So even though the likelihood may be rather small, at this point, we're doing much more serious things, such as telling people they can't go to a religious service or telling people they can't have a gathering of more than 10 people. That's much more disruptive to your life than just remembering, oh, I've got to take my bag with my laundered handkerchief in it. So, and the virus could be picked up. You see, what they haven't really said is that this virus is transmitted, admittedly, primarily by sneezes and coughs and all the air droplets. But we believe also that it is transmitted by something called fomites, which is a word. I have no idea where the word comes from. It's F as in Frank, OMIT as in Tom, ES. And a fomite is any surface that you, as well as somebody else, may have touched recently that may carry on it the microbe in question. And when a microbe is transmittable by fomites, and we believe the microbe can exist outside of a human host, sitting on a table, a countertop, whatever, for, we guess, 3 days. Well, so, and frankly, when you go to a pharmacy, or a grocery store, a doctor's office, you have no idea who touched that countertop in the last 3 days. So you really, it's a crapshoot as to whether it is contaminated or not. And in the case that it might be, it seems to me much less bothersome to remember to take your protective something you're going to hold on to in a little bag and take it out, from my point of view, whenever I go into the drugstore, because I might, out of habit, put my hands down on the counter. And I'm not thinking that, hey, wait a minute, you might have just picked up from somebody else who put their hand on the counter. So I just have my protection in my hand all the time. And for instance, me, I can say everything my hand touches, it's my right hand, and my left hand just travels along with me at the end of my left arm, but it doesn't pick up anything. So I don't need 2 handkerchiefs or washcloths or paper or whatever. But it's just, you know, you hate to think of somebody who's very conscientious about washing their hands and about doing everything right. They have a face mask on, but then they went out to the pharmacy to get their prescription, and they put their hand down on the counter, skin down on the counter, and they picked it up because a lady who came in 2 hours ago just is not a hand washer, and she left coronavirus, which might well have been from her cousin. It may not be her coronavirus because I say these viruses that live on what we call fomites, which is any surface that, whether it's a book, whether it's a candy bar, whether it's a counter, whatever, she left a virus on that surface.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We don't know that. So why don't we just protect ourselves with something that is a little thing to think about? But I mean, especially if you keep the bag containing the handkerchief or washcloth or whatever you're using in your purse anyway, what's the problem? And it might save you and people who love you. Most people, as I said at the very beginning, who contract coronavirus will survive. It's well over 90%, and in some populations, over 95%. So, but then the nasty thing about it is, if it's over 95%, let's say it's 96%, but that 4%, they're somebody's mother or grandmother, and young people do get this. And
Okay.
they are not as susceptible to dying of it as older people are, but they certainly can die of it. And a number of them may recover, but may have at age 20 or 30 loss of 20, 25% of their lung function. And somebody age, say 25, who is going to lose 25% of their lung function for the rest of their lives, that spells trouble when they get to be 50 and they have wear and tear on the lungs anyway. So why don't we just avoid the whole thing by having everybody make sure they don't touch surfaces where they're not certain who touched it last or before last. Because as I say, the virus will survive on a surface for maybe, let's say, 3 days. I don't have a very, very certain figure on that, but I'm not going to quibble if it's 2.5 days or 3.5 days. The point is, the virus was left on the counter by somebody who was here yesterday afternoon, and you don't know who they are. And let's just step out of the whole thing, and
Okay.
just say we will have something that would allow at least one hand to touch whatever.
What other things should people who have mental illness, um, what other things can they be doing or thinking about to help themselves during this time?
Well, a big one, I would say, is the management of anxiety and uncertainty. Um, First of all, if you have something that for you is a problem, such as how are you going to pay next month's rent, I should say your best bet is to tackle the problem. To do as some people do, which is uh, uh, lie in bed or in a lounge chair saying, I don't know how I'm going to pay the rent. I don't know how I'm going to pay the rent. Well, that may be a very true statement, but it doesn't solve the problem to stand around and complain about how difficult it is to have that on your mind. Uh, Approach your landlord, and approach your landlord, I would say, by appointment, so that the landlord is not thinking, I have to get the janitor to clean the basement steps. In other words, the landlord is paying attention to you. And that's also a time when, if you have been a renter for a while and you can say, I have always paid the rent on time before, and I'm a good tenant because I have never caused another tenant in the building complain about the noise I was making or some mess that I left somewhere. In other words, I'm a good bet. You want to keep me here.
Mm-hmm.
And then approach the landlord. You have to have done a little bit of homework, because you have to have done calculating when could you pay the rent, or when could you pay at least a portion of the rent. And for heaven's sakes, don't promise to pay the rent on the 10th of the month. I'm assuming it's due on the 1st. If the 10th of the month depends on whether you'll get a check that's coming from a distance, in time and so on. Give yourself plenty of room. Better to promise to give it on the 15th and be able to stick to the 15th or sooner than to promise that it's there, they'll have the rent on the 10th, and on the 10th you say, gee, it still hasn't come in.
Mm-hmm.
Because that gets you as, you made an agreement with me and you're not sticking to the agreement. And that's very annoying for the landlord. So always give enough time so that you're certain you will have it on the date you specify. Um, and uh, some people who know their landlords well enough would be able perhaps to pay 80% of the rent now and the remaining 20% whenever their pandemic situation and the economy gets back on track. But that's only a person who has known the landlord a long time, and the landlord knows that they are trustworthy.
And we're all in this together. I mean, we're all facing very, very similar problems. So at least there may be some comfort knowing that we're not alone, and the problems that we face are the problems that are being faced exactly by other people all throughout the world. So,
And it may also be that the landlord is under some pressure because he has to pay the people who lent him the money to buy the building, and he's got to make sure that he can pay that well enough so that he'll still own the building.
yeah.
So uh, that's why some landlords may say, well, I'll think about it. What that means is he has to calculate, if he got your rent on the 15th, could he get it and bank it and get it to his creditor in time for the 22nd or so? You see what I'm saying?
Right.
He doesn't want to be in trouble with the guy who loaned him some money so he could buy the building.
Well, this is an unprecedented time. We have never seen this. There's been a complete shutdown in most people's ability to earn money. We're being told to stay home, and so there are going to be, I think, a lot of exceptions, and the ability for people to kind of let things ride for a little bit. Uh,
Yes.
so,
And I
uh,
think this is where, having been a reliable renter and payer, in the good times, if you can claim that, will stand you in good stead, because you can say to the landlord, look, I've been in this apartment for 5 years and I have never been late with my rent before. I'm not that kind of person, but these circumstances are exceptional. Now, also, if there is any government program that you may never have applied for before, or you may have, but if there's any government program that you need to get a form and fill out the form as to why you are applying for this and so on, realize that just because we're all very worried and upset, the government agency is probably swamped by people making essentially the same request as you are, and they don't have 50% more personnel. So you have to, I would apply for that first.
Okay.
Your landlord perhaps is a kind of guy that you could reach almost any day if you paid attention to when he's in the rental office.
Okay.
So get the government stuff going before, and be careful to ask the government employee, if you speak to one, how long realistically, not what was originally printed on the form in good times, but how long realistically do you think it might be before I got a response? And if the response were favorable, before I got a check.
Excellent.
Um,
This has been very, very helpful, Doctor, for me, and I expect for all of our listeners. I did want to kind of wrap things up and let people know that we're going to be doing this every Friday. We're going to be videotaping these and then posting these to YouTube, so that in the evening when people are done with work or have whatever free time they have, they can tune in and watch. And for those of you who have been seen this program before, please tell your friends and spread the word, so that we can help others like ourselves who are dealing with these issues, not only with the coronavirus, but just in general, the problems that we normally face.
there is one thing that I would like to add, and this is perhaps more geared to the people who have a diagnosed mental illness.
Okay.
Don't go in for what ifs. What if the form that I sent to the government agency doesn't arrive? What if something more far-fetched? I mean, what if I'm standing on the street corner and somebody comes around the corner and mounts up on the sidewalk and kills me? I mean, people can get extremely imaginative about what they, because worrying about a what if, first of all, it's not here, it's not real, it's not something that's happened, and it takes away your energy from things that are real, that are here, that have happened, and makes you even more anxious to know, to no advantage to you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it'll only make you less able to cope with things like filling out that form or calling your landlord.
Mm-hmm.
So don't, and besides, most what ifs never happen. And they make you, because you've been concentrating on something that is very unlikely to happen, they you have less resources, less energy to concentrate on what is really the problem in front of you.
Excellent. Excellent
And
advice.
if I wake up in the morning and I've got a big problem, this has happened to me a number of times in my life, and I sort of cringe and I say, I don't want to call, I don't want to. I say, okay, this is what you're going to do. You're going to have a cup of coffee or tea, and you're going to, while you drink the coffee or tea, you say to yourself, when I finish this, I'm going to fill out the form or call the person or whatever. But it's a combination of giving yourself, you don't have to do it right now, this minute. But on the other hand, in a short period of time, you're going to get there. And I tell myself I'm going to do it. And after all, it's just a form which will start with my name and my address, which I know very well, or it's just my landlord whom I've talked to before and he's not an ogre, and I can handle this. And I give myself a sort of talking to and pep talk while I'm drinking my coffee or tea. Then, when I am finished with the coffee and tea and I make the call, I may say to myself, okay, after you've made the call, you can have a chocolate chip cookie, but only after. So
Mm-hmm.
I sort of cajole myself and uh, prep myself and do everything I can to advance the thing. And then I find that I have filled out the form, I have called the landlord, and I have done everything I wanted. And then I do a little, yay, me, I did it. And I give myself a pat on the back. Even if there's some other problem that comes, it only takes 5 seconds to say to yourself, yay, me.
Excellent. Well, thank you. This has been a wonderful, wonderful time together, and I'm looking forward to your next show next week.
Okay, so goodbye, everybody, and I hope that you will see the next show and the next one, and you will tell your friends, I hope, that it is factual, truthful, and at the same time upbeat. Because remember, this pandemic is pretty bad, but most of us will survive it. And how we survive it, the quality of our life, depends upon us and depends upon how good we were at solving the problems it presented. And the best way to get yourself to be good at solving a problem is to first convince yourself that the problem is actually quite solvable. We are not being asked to do something which is a total enigma. What does that mean? So just go forward and look forward to the day when you can tell your children or your grandchildren, but you haven't heard about the story of the pandemic of 2020. And it becomes entertainment. Just as for many of us who are living after the end of World War II, many, many books and movies have been put together and sold to us as historically accurate, we would hope, but also as entertainment. Think about that. So, goodbye, and until next time.